What if our civilization wasn't invented, but installed like software? The room is silent. A museum after closing is unlike any other place on Earth. Its air feels heavier, as if thousands of years are exhaling in the dark. Shadows stretch long across the floor. Display lights hum in soft halos. And there, inside a glass case no larger than a bedside lamp, rests an object so small you could carry it in one hand. A clay tablet, cracked, uneven, unremarkable, until you really look. Its tiny wedge-shaped marks glow faintly under the amber spotlight, like code etched into stone. And if you listen closely, you can almost hear it breathing history, or perhaps remembering it. Because this tablet carries something dangerous, a story that shouldn't exist, a beginning that contradicts our beginning, the clay whisper that shouldn't be there. We comfort ourselves with the idea that civilization grew slowly, that humans wandered, hunted, gathered, then farmed, that villages grew into towns, towns into cities, cities into empires, that writing evolved from pictures scratched in dirt to complex symbols carved in stone. But this clay tablet refuses to play by those rules. Its writing system, cuneiform, is already flawless. Its language already structured. Its format already administrative and organized. There is no earlier version, no crude experimental script, no gradual development. It appears suddenly, as if someone had handed Earth a fully formed system. It is not the beginning we were taught. It is the beginning someone else started for us. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. A hidden framework beneath every empire. Let's imagine civilization as a computer. Not metaphorically, but mechanically. Every computer needs a user, a system, and an operating framework. Now, look at ancient history through that lens. From Mesopotamia to Egypt, from ancient China to the early Americas, we find the same modules: a supreme ruler, a priestly hierarchy, a divine mandate, a sacred calendar, codified laws, flood myths, a cosmic order delivered from the sky. These appear not gradually, but simultaneously, separated by oceans, mountains, and epochs, yet shaped by the same template. That is not cultural drift. That is not slow evolution. That is installation. The clay tablet in the museum case is not just a record. It is a timestamp in the system log, marking when the operating system went live. The missing chapter at the dawn of time. If you walk backward through human history, you expect to see simplicity, fewer tools, simpler structures, primitive systems giving birth to advanced ones. But instead of a slope, we find a cliff. Cities appear fully formed. Astronomy appears with precision. Mathematics appears with complexity. Architecture appears at monumental scale. No practice attempts, no growing pains, no rough drafts. It is as if chapter 1 of the human story is missing, and we begin reading at chapter 10. And the clay tablet, cracked and dusty, is one of the only fragments reminding us that something came before the chapter we know. The question no historian wants to ask. Blueprints do not replicate themselves. If we observe the same blueprint in civilizations separated by oceans, then somewhere, sometime, someone created the master template. And that's the question this tiny tablet forces us to ask. If the operating system of civilization exists, who wrote it? Not a god of myth, not a king of legend, but an author that history omits, an architect, a programmer, a teacher, someone who didn't wait for humans to evolve sophistication, but delivered it like a downloadable package. This clay artifact could be one of their last surviving instructions, encoded not in metaphors, but in administration, law, kingship, and chronology. A moment to breathe before the descent. Let the idea settle. Let the dust fall in your mind. Let the room quiet itself. Because the deeper we go, the more this tablet starts to sound like a message. Not from the past we know, but from a past we lost. The reset that erased a world. Every installation begins with a wipe. If humanity received a new operating system, then something older must have been removed first. And the answer might lie in the one thing every ancient culture agrees on. A flood, a world-ending deluge, a reset. Water rising, swallowing coastlines, drowning knowledge, erasing cities built too close to the ancient shoreline. Tens of thousands of square kilometers now lie beneath 120 meters of ocean. Lost temples, lost harbors, lost civilizations. If someone wanted to reset the world, wipe all traces of a previous system, there is no eraser more perfect than rising seas. The clay tablet, therefore, isn't simply a record. It could be a reboot log, a file written after a catastrophic system reset, marking the beginning of a reinstated order. Opening the door to a 2-hour descent. This video isn't a lecture, it's a descent, a 2-hour reconstruction of the operating system that underlies humanity. Kingship, priesthood, divine mandate, calendars, laws, architecture, the strange global motif of knowledge from the sky. We won't decide who wrote it, not yet, but we will examine the pattern. Because patterns reveal authors, even when names are lost. And this pattern, this alignment of myths, mathematics, architecture, and authority, is too precise, too synchronized, too global to be coincidence. Something, or someone, engineered the starting conditions of our world. And the first clue sits quietly in that glass case. Cinematic closing image. Picture the camera slowly pushing toward the clay tablet, its edges chipped, its symbols glowing faintly like ancient circuitry, its cracks forming lines that resemble a network, branching, connecting, pulsing with forgotten instructions. The museum around it fades into darkness. Only the tablet remains. A tiny, impossible survivor of a world erased, waiting for us to remember what it tried to tell. Across the world, the same blueprint appears, again and again. And blueprints don't draw themselves. Imagine unrolling a map of the ancient world, not the political borders we memorized in school, but a map of symbols, crowns, temples, calendars, flood myths, sky gods, repeating across continents like scattered pieces of a single forgotten manual. Different languages, different landscapes, different eras, yet the same pattern, whispering the same design. It's as if humanity didn't build its civilizations independently, but woke up in a world pre-configured. The same modules in every corner of the world. If you gather the oldest records of humanity and place them side by side, Sumerian tablets, Egyptian pyramid texts, Chinese oracle bones, Mayan codices, Vedic hymns, you'll find something unsettling. They're built from the same components. Module 1. Kingship, appearing fully formed. Every civilization begins with a king, not a chieftain, not a democratic council, but a divinely appointed monarch. He arrives with titles, symbols, rituals. He doesn't rise slowly from tribal leadership. He emerges like a preset role, activated at the start of the system. Module 2. A priesthood as the administrator class. Where there is a king, there is always a priest, or a shaman, or a keeper of sacred knowledge. This priesthood manages calendars, rituals, astronomy, law, communication with the sky. In every early society, priests are not assistants. They are the system administrators of the operating framework. Module 3. Sacred calendars and cosmic timekeeping. Ancient calendars appear mathematically advanced. 360-day base systems, lunar-solar synchronizations, accurate solstice alignments, star tracking temples. None of these have prototypes. They appear perfect on arrival, like a clock imported from an unseen workshop. Module 4. Law codes with no evolution curve. The Code of Urnamu. The Laws of Hammurabi. Egyptian Ma'at. Chinese Mandate of Heaven moral codes. These are not primitive beginnings. They are structured, hierarchical, and philosophical from day one. Module 5. The Universal Flood Memory. Every culture's origin story starts with water. Not metaphorical water, world reset water. We see pairs saved, chosen survivors, divine warnings, destruction of a previous order, different continents, identical core. These 5 modules are not cultural coincidences. They are system components, and they appear in civilizations separated by oceans they could not cross. A global template before there were globes. Imagine placing transparent sheets representing each ancient society on top of one another. Suddenly, you don't see separate cultures. You see a repeating crown, a repeating temple, a repeating solar calendar, a repeating sky god, a repeating flood reset, a repeating social hierarchy. It aligns too neatly, too consistently, too globally. It feels less like cultural evolution and more like someone ran copy and paste across the planet. But here's what makes it even stranger. These civilizations didn't start simple. They began at version 10.0. The first kings weren't amateurs. The first temples weren't crude. The first calendars weren't guesses. These systems didn't grow. They launched. Like modules activated the moment humanity rebooted. The blueprint hidden in myth, architecture, and power. Let's follow the blueprint, echo into 3 domains: mythology, architecture, and political power. 1. Mythology, the shared origin script. Across the world, gods descend from the sky, kings are chosen, knowledge is given, floods reset everything. The first city is built with divine instruction. Writing is a gift, not an invention. If myths were independent inventions, they should differ wildly. But instead, they share a synchronized storyline. It's as if multiple writers followed the same script, or inherited fragments of one ancient master myth. 2. Architecture, the impossible synchronization. Temples built for sky gods share identical orientations, identical solar alignments, identical multi-tier structures, identical rituals of ascent and descent. Egyptian pyramids, Sumerian ziggurats, Mesoamerican pyramids, and Chinese mounds all share architectural DNA. These cultures never traded blueprints, yet they followed the same cosmic diagram. 3. Political power, the template of rule. Every ancient society uses the same three-layer hierarchy: a divine king, a priestly class, the common people. If history evolved naturally, we should see experiments: republics, rotating councils, cooperative tribes. But instead, civilization begins with authoritarian hierarchy, as if pre-installed. This is not the messy birth of politics. This is a standardized system launched everywhere at once. What kind of blueprint survives a flood? Imagine a world erased by rising oceans after the Ice Age. Cities vanish, harbors disappear, libraries drown, stories fragment. Yet somehow, the blueprint survives. It reappears in India, Sumer, Egypt, China, Mesoamerica, and forgotten islands we're still discovering beneath the waves. But how? How does a template survive extinction? There are only 3 possibilities. Possibility 1. Human survivors carried it. A tiny group survived the flood and reseeded civilization. But that requires them to travel across continents at a time when such travel seems impossible. Possibility 2. Someone preserved and reinstalled it. A more advanced civilization, human or not, restored the operating system after the global wipe. Possibility 3. The blueprint was never physical. It may have been encoded in oral traditions, symbolic frameworks, ritual practices, astronomical instruction. A kind of cultural software embedded directly into survivors. Whatever the case, the result is the same. Multiple civilizations rebooted into the same structure. Copy-paste civilizations. Coincidence or configuration? If 5 civilizations unknowingly invented the same components, we might call it coincidence. If 10 civilizations did, we might call it pattern. When dozens did, across oceans, across millennia, across languages, we must call it what it looks like: configuration, engineered structure, installed hierarchy, designed beginnings. Not a path walked many times, but a single road built long ago and rediscovered again and again by those who thought they were starting from scratch. A cosmic template or a forgotten teacher? The shared blueprint could imply a prehistoric global culture, an advanced maritime civilization, a breakaway human group, an external intelligence teaching early humans, or a lost epic erased by flood and time. We won't choose a theory here, but we will inspect the evidence, the patterns, the echoes, because echoes are not meaningless. They are the final vibrations of a vanished voice, and that voice shaped the world we still live in. Breathing pause. Take a breath. Let the noise settle. Let the patterns align in your mind, because once you see the template, you start noticing it everywhere. In governments, in religions, in cities, in the very assumptions that built our world. And that leads us to the next question, the biggest one. If the blueprint exists, who drew it? Someone wrote the operating system. Someone decided the modules. Someone standardized kingship, priesthood, astronomy, and law. Someone taught the first humans how to build civilization. The blueprint is real, its echoes are everywhere, but the architect, still missing. And to find them, we must go deeper into the world before history. The one drowned beneath a global sea. If a civilization wanted to disappear, the ocean would be the perfect eraser. Picture a world that no longer exists. Not a world of myths, but a physical place. Coastlines, stretching far beyond today's shore. Green valleys where now lies open sea. Islands, twice as large as the ones we know. Continents with shapes unrecognizable to modern eyes. It's all still there, but hidden under 120 meters of saltwater silence. If we want to understand the blueprint that shaped civilization, we cannot start with the cities we found, but with the ones we lost. The map of the world, before the world we know. Most people don't realize how recently the world changed. 12,000 years ago, an eye blink in Earth's timeline, the planet looked radically different. Sea levels were 120 meters lower. The coastlines were twice as wide. Entire continental platforms were dry land. Rivers flowed where ocean currents now move. Islands formed chains instead of isolated dots. This wasn't just another set of shorelines. It was the habitable zone of early humanity. And it's gone. Not destroyed by war, fire, or climate, but drowned. The rise of oceans at the end of the last ice age erased more land than all natural disasters in recorded history combined. So if a civilization existed before our recorded beginning, this is exactly where it would be. The lost rim of the continents. The forgotten fringe where land met sea. Now buried, silent, unreachable, unless we know where to look. The drowned cities we keep finding. For most of the 20th century, archaeologists assumed that everything important happened inland. Civilization, they thought, grew in deserts and river valleys far from the coasts. But technology changed the story. With sonar mapping, underwater drones, and satellite topography, we've begun to find impossible things beneath the waves. Dwarka, India. A city with streets, walls, and symmetrical structures, dated thousands of years older than expected. Yonaguni, Japan. Terraced architecture carved with precision, resembling megalithic stoneworks found on land. Doggerland, North Sea, an entire European Atlantis now submerged, once home to forests, rivers, and human settlements. Bimini Road, Caribbean. Massive stone blocks aligned in geometric patterns, lying on a seafloor where no civilization should have existed. The Sunda Shelf, Southeast Asia. A drowned continent-sized platform that once connected Indochina to Indonesia and Australia, possibly home to millions. These discoveries share one problem. They don't fit the official timeline. They belong to a world that wasn't supposed to have cities, calendars, astronomy, or advanced architecture. Yet here they are, silent, submerged reminders that something came before the civilizations we know. The ocean as the great archive and the great shredder. Water is unique. It preserves and destroys at the same time. It can hold a city perfectly still for 10,000 years, but it can also erase every fragile detail, leaving only stone skeletons behind. Imagine walking through a submerged harbor, Broken pillars, collapsed roofs, stone paths covered in coral, statues with faces melted by time. It feels ancient, but also recent, as if the people who built it didn't vanish, they were simply erased. Civilization may not have begun where we think. It may have begun where we can no longer see. And that changes everything. The shape of the old world and the clues it left behind. If you redraw the map of Earth with ancient coastlines, you start seeing patterns. Pattern 1. Person prime real estate was the first to drown. Most early humans lived within 20 to 50 kilometers of the coast. Rivers emptied into fertile deltas that made perfect settlement zones. Everything people built was exactly where the ocean eventually swallowed it. Pattern 2. The first harbors are underwater. Great civilizations love harbors. Trade, boats, astronomy, movement. So where would ancient harbor cities be? Right on the continental shelf. Where are the continental shelves? Underwater. Pattern 3. The continental rims form a ring of lost cities. Look at a map of drowned shelves. Southeast Asia, India, Arabia, East Africa, Mediterranean Basin, Japan, Atlantic Ridge, Caribbean Basin. It forms a global ring of missing history, a literal ring of forgotten coastlines, a ring where a seafaring civilization, if one existed, would have thrived. Not inland, not isolated, but connected by ocean routes we can no longer trace. Was there a civilization before the flood? This question divides experts, skeptics, dreamers, and scholars. But the evidence, fragmented and submerged, forces us to consider it. Clue 1. Megaliths appear without prototypes. Massive stone structures require planning, mathematics, astronomy, and social organization. Yet they appear, fully formed. Where did the knowledge come from? Clue 2. Global myths speak of a lost golden age. Greek, Sumerian, Hindu, Maya, Polynesian, all describe an age before the flood. A world where the gods lived among humans, long-lived kings ruled, knowledge was abundant. Disasters wiped the slate clean. These myths are not identical, they are consistent. Clue 3. Genetic bottlenecks after the Ice Age. Human DNA shows population crashes consistent with global catastrophe. Something happened, something big. Clue 4. Agriculture appears suddenly after the flood, as if someone reinstalled the instructions. The world after the flood doesn't look like a beginning. It looks like a reboot. What if the blueprint came from the drowned world? The modules described in Fund 2. Kingship, calendars, priesthood, divine mandate, may not have originated in Mesopotamia or Egypt. They may have been echoes, carried from a civilization on the drowned shelves. A civilization erased by the ocean, but not erased from memory. Fragments survived in myths, rituals, architecture, alignments, symbols, social structures. Early civilizations may have been rebuilding, not inventing, restoring, not creating, reinstalling, not starting fresh. The ocean took the cities, but not the blueprint. Imagine a priest, thousands of years after the flood, holding scraps of knowledge inherited from a world he never saw. He knows how to align temples with the stars, how to mark solstices, how to crown kings with divine authority, how to read the sky as a calendar, how to tell his people that time resets in cycles. But he doesn't know why. He's following a pattern because it's the only pattern left. A pattern older than the land he stands on, older than the stories he tells, older than the gods he serves. A pattern from a world now buried under shifting waves. What else lies beneath the waves? The ocean is vast. We've mapped Mars better than our own seabed. Only 5% of the ocean floor has been explored. The rest is unknown. Untouchable ruins, drowned stone circles, ancient ports, forgotten structures, unread tablets locked in silt. If someone wanted to hide the earliest chapter of human civilization, they couldn't have chosen a more perfect vault. Earth did the job for them. Breathing, pause. Close your eyes. Picture those lost coastlines. Imagine walking through a city you can't see, but whose shadow still shapes the world we live in. Because the flood didn't erase everything. It left echoes. And those echoes became civilization. Maybe our story doesn't start on land. Maybe it starts on the cliffs now erased, on the harbors now drowned, on the islands now broken into archipelagos. Maybe humanity's first cities weren't the first at all. They were the survivors rebuilding. And the blueprint, the one repeated across continents, may be the fingerprint of that lost world. A fingerprint we still follow, without knowing who left it. To understand the first architects, we must go underwater, into the dark, into the drowned memory of Earth. Because before kings, before temples, before writing, there was a coastline. And that coastline holds the missing chapter. Real history should have prototypes. This story seems to start at version 10.0. Imagine opening a software system and discovering it has no beta version, no early build, no rough draft, just a perfectly polished release. That's what humanity's first architecture looks like. Not primitive huts gradually evolving, but massive, astronomically aligned, geometrically perfect structures appearing out of nowhere, as if downloaded, not developed. And nowhere is this more obvious than in the world's megaliths. The first monuments should be the simplest, but they aren't. If civilization truly evolved slowly, our earliest structures should be small, experimental, inconsistent, messy, obvious learning attempts. But instead, the first things humans built at scale were multi-ton stone temples, perfectly aligned passages, astronomical observatories, laser-precision stone cuts, towering megalithic complexes. In other words, not the beginning of a learning curve, but the peak of one. Consider this. Humans supposedly went from digging stick huts to aligning 100-ton stones with the equinox, with no gradual steps in between. It makes no sense, unless someone uploaded the final version from the start. Göbekli Tepe, the impossible beginning. Let's start with the oldest example that rewrote archaeology. Göbekli Tepe, Turkey, 11,600 years old. Older than writing, pottery, agriculture, cities, every known civilization. This site shouldn't exist. It has megalithic T-pillars weighing 10 to 20 tons, advanced animal reliefs, perfect geometric circles, astronomical alignments, a planned, phased construction, layered architecture built over centuries. Here's the contradiction. Hunter-gatherers should not be able to build this. According to textbooks, they lacked the population, the engineering, the organization, the mathematics, the astronomical knowledge. Yet they built something so advanced that it looks like version 10.0 architecture. No prototypes, no simpler sites before it. Just a sudden masterpiece, as if someone handed them the blueprint. Sacsayhuaman and the puzzle of stone. Travel across the world to Peru. Sacsayhuaman, a wall of interlocking stones so precisely shaped that they fit without mortar. Some have 12 to 20 angles. You cannot slide a blade between them. The stones weigh up to 200 tons. The engineering is beyond anything we expect from early civilizations. But the real mystery? There's no earlier version. No staircase of progress. Just immaculate perfection from the start. How do you go from no stonework at all to 200-ton polygonal blocks? You don't. Not without a template. The Egyptian pyramids, not a beginning, but a memory. Egypt is often called the birthplace of civilized architecture. But look closer. The Great Pyramid of Giza. It is astronomically aligned, geodetically precise, structurally perfect, made of 2.3 million stones, oriented to true north with shocking accuracy. Now compare it to what came later. Smaller pyramids, crooked pyramids, collapsed pyramids, eroded reconstructions. Civilization is supposed to improve over time, but in Egypt, it starts with the most perfect structure first. As if the knowledge wasn't developed, it was inherited. The Great Pyramid looks like a remembered idea, not an invented one. A monument from an earlier era, rebuilt imperfectly by those who came after. Pumapunku, engineering with no pre-engineering. High in the Andes lies Pumapunku, the site archaeology desperately tries to explain. Here we find machine-level precision cuts, H-blocks identical to each other, drill holes perfectly spaced, stone surfaces as smooth as industrial machining, slabs weighing 100+ tons, all supposedly carved with copper tools and stone hammers. Except copper tools cannot cut andesite, and the site has no precursor structures, no trial and error, no primitive versions, just advanced geometry, as if copied from a template they themselves didn't fully understand. When the first buildings look like the final form, this is the pattern. No prototypes, no gradual improvement, no experimentation. The most advanced structures appear earliest, as if an entire architectural tradition was rebooted from a saved file. Civilization didn't start simple. It started advanced, then declined. That's backwards, unless we're not seeing civilization's evolution, we're seeing its restoration. Like a rebuilt system remembering how to function even after losing the original source code. Archaeoastronomy, a language carried from a lost world. The earliest human structures share solstice alignments, equinox windows, heliacal star risings, lunar standstill tracking, Orion, Pleiades, Sirius connections, cardinal orientation. Different cultures, same alignments. This becomes even stranger when you realize many sites are aligned to stars as they appeared 10,000 to 12,000 years ago. Why would early agricultural societies track stars they couldn't possibly have observed for thousands of years? Unless they inherited the orientation from an older world. Were megaliths the starter pack of civilization? Let's imagine a scenario. A civilization survives a global catastrophe, a flood, an impact event, a rapid climate shift. When they rebuild, their population is smaller, their tools are simpler, their resources depleted. But their memories remain. They remember how to build with giant stones, how to align temples to the sky, how to track the heavens, how to encode knowledge in architecture. So they pass the knowledge to others, but the others do not fully understand it. They imitate what they can no longer create perfectly. Thus, the first post-flood structures are the most advanced. Later ones decline. The blueprint fades. This mimics exactly what we see. Architecture as cultural memory, not technological invention. The hidden hand of a prehistoric architect class. What if the megaliths were the work of a lost seafaring civilization, an ancient priest-engineer caste, a breakaway human group with advanced knowledge, or something non-human guiding early humans? We don't need to decide. We only follow the evidence. Sudden complexity, global similarity, astronomical precision, impossible engineering, no evolutionary path. These are the fingerprints of an architect class, one that left behind stone instructions, then vanished. Breathing pause. Pause here. Picture these monuments at the moment of construction. Massive stones lifted with ease. Blueprints drawn with cosmic precision. Builders guided by knowledge older than their world. Not a beginning, a remembering. Not invention, restoration. A flicker of a lost civilization pulsing back into existence. If these are the final versions, where are the missing versions? If Göbekli Tepe is version 10.0, where is version 1, version 2, version 3? Where are the beginner temples, failed experiments, rough drafts, messy prototypes? Nowhere, because they drowned. Under the water, under the mud, under 12,000 years of silence, humanity did not start with huts. It started with monuments. Because monuments were all that survived the reset. Someone uploaded the blueprint, then disappeared. The world's first monuments show advanced geometry, astronomical intelligence, precise engineering, standardized structure, all without evolution. Someone, somewhere, at some time, uploaded the architectural blueprint to humanity. And then, they left. Or they vanished, or they hid, or they drowned with their cities. But their structures remained. Stone memory blocks scattered across the continents. Not beginnings, remnants, reminders. Version 10.0 running on a world still searching for version 1. In myth after myth, the world doesn't end in fire. It ends in water. Picture the earth not as it is today, but as a world trembling at the edge of transformation. Ice sheets stretching across continents, oceans locked away in frozen walls, and humanity living in narrow strips of fertile land beneath a sky that held different constellations. Then, the ice melts, not over millennia, but in a burst, a cascade, a planetary exhale that sent oceans roaring across continents. When water rises fast enough, it doesn't just drown a city, it erases a timeline. And every ancient culture remembered that moment, not as history, as the day the world rebooted. The flood memory that refuses to die. Travel through human mythology, and you'll find a strange consistency. Stories told by cultures with no contact, no shared language, no shared gods, yet all describing the same cataclysm. A great flood, a divine warning, a chosen few who survived, a world washed clean. Sumerians wrote it in the Eridu Genesis, the Hebrews in the story of Noah, the Greeks in Deucalion's flood, the Hindus in the tale of Manu, the Chinese in the legend of Gunyu, the Maya in the Popol Vuh, the Polynesians in countless island traditions, Aboriginal Australians in stories older than the pyramids. The details shift, the meaning shifts, but the structure is identical. This isn't a metaphor lodged in our subconscious. It's a memory, a shared human scar, a boundary line between two worlds, before the flood and after the flood. The science behind the myth, how the ocean rose 120 meters. At the end of the last ice age, something extraordinary happened. Between 12,900 and 8,200 years ago, a blink of an eye in geological time, sea levels rose by 120 meters. Not gradually, in violent pulses. These pulses are known as meltwater pulses 1A and 1B. Events so dramatic they would have looked like the ocean itself stood up and moved inland. Imagine being a human living near the coast, as almost all early humans did. Here is what you would see. Rivers reversing direction. Forests disappearing under waves. Homes washed away. Fires extinguished instantly. Your world shrinking day by day. The horizon swallowing the land. In places like Southeast Asia, India, Europe, the Americas, entire regions vanished beneath the sea. What survives today are only the highest points. Mountaintops, hill forts, raised temples. Everything else, the heart of early civilization, went underwater. If you lived through that, you wouldn't call it a climate shift. You would call it the end of the world. The flood as a cosmic divide, before versus after. Flood myths don't just describe drowning. They describe the end of an age, the fall of gods, the shortening of lifespans, the loss of knowledge, the reorganization of kingship, the beginning of agriculture, the founding of new cities, the start of calendars, new laws, new power structures. Everything resets. Everything begins again. It's not water washing the world, it's water wiping the slate clean. A global reset button, pressed, not by accident, but as part of the cycle that every ancient civilization believed the universe followed. The flood is not the end. It is the boundary between worlds, a firewall between the world that drowned and the world we remember. The strange pattern, knowledge decreases after the flood. If history were linear, we would expect knowledge to grow over time. But something odd happens in the archaeological record. Humanity's earliest post-flood structures are the most advanced. Then, astronomy degrades. Architecture simplifies. Calendars lose precision. Myths fragment. Lifespans shorten. Kingship becomes less divine. Rituals lose their cosmic meaning. It's as if humanity inherited the remnants of a system, but not the system itself. We preserved the interface, but lost the source code. The flood didn't just erase coastlines, it erased memory. And what survived were the echoes. Who was reset? And who survived? Every flood myth chooses survivors. Not random groups, but specific ones. A righteous man, a wise king, a priest, a builder, a navigator, a chosen bloodline. It's always someone who carries knowledge, someone who remembers the blueprint, even if imperfectly. In some myths, the survivors are human. In others, they are semi-divine. In others, they are teachers who return after the waters recede. Quetzalcoatl in the Americas, Oannes in Mesopotamia, Viracocha in the Andes, Manu in India, Enoch Toth in esoteric traditions. Figures who arrive after the flood, bringing astronomy, agriculture, kingship, architecture, calendars, writing. Exactly the modules that appear simultaneously across early civilizations. Were they mythological, symbolic, or the last members of a previous civilization, teaching survivors how to reboot the system? The flood as a strategic wipe. What if the flood wasn't random, not a divine punishment, not an accident of climate, but simply an opportunity? If a civilization wanted to hide its origins, restart a world, or erase earlier structures, a rising ocean would be the perfect tool. Water destroys cities, buries coastlines, scrambles artifacts, compresses time, erases written records, wipes clean every fragile trace. But the one thing water cannot erase is stone. And that's exactly what survived. Megaliths, temples, pyramids, astronomical markers, oral myths encoded as memories. Stone was the storage device that survived the flood. Myth was the software update that told the story of what happened. Everything else drowned. The psychological reset. Humanity starts over. After the flood, humans didn't just rebuild the world. They rebuilt themselves. Myths describe people afraid of the sky, people seeing gods as distant and silent, people losing previous lifespans, people forgetting ancient languages, people wandering without purpose, people relearning agriculture, people restarting calendars. Civilization didn't begin after the flood. It began again after the flood. The world before the flood was the forgotten first edition. The world after the flood is edition 2. We are living in the rebooted version of humanity. What did the flood try to erase? This is the question no culture answers directly. If the flood was a reset, what exactly was being reset? Possibilities include 1. A civilization too advanced, one that exceeded natural limits. 2. A leadership system that needed replacement. Kingship and priesthood are reinstalled after the flood. 3. A biological lineage. Myths frequently describe giants, demigods, or long-lived beings disappearing after the flood. 4. Knowledge. Humanity wasn't meant to keep. Astronomy, geometry, cosmic cycles all become more primitive after the reset. 5. Evidence of who the architects were. The flood conveniently hides coastal cities, advanced structures, and artifacts under the sea. We don't know the answer, but every myth hints that the flood didn't just drown people, It drowned truth. Breathing. Pause. Take a breath. Let the image settle. A world submerged. A blueprint half erased. Survivors carrying fragments of forgotten knowledge. A new humanity trying to rebuild without the manual. The flood wasn't the end. It was the dividing line, the memory fracture, the moment where the old world vanished and the new world began. After the water receded, something returned. In almost every myth, after the waters drain and the world dries, a mysterious figure appears, a visitor, a guide, a teacher, someone who rebuilds cities, restores calendars, teaches agriculture, creates kingship, establishes law, aligns temples, gives writing. What if this wasn't myth? What if these teachers were the remnants of the world before the flood, the last members of the architect class returning to reboot civilization? The modules of civilization didn't appear spontaneously. They were reinstalled by someone or by something. Unique says every operating system has a programmer. Ours is the one name missing from every history book. Imagine standing at the edge of a flooded world, watching the ocean pull back after swallowing an age. You see mountains stripped to bone, rivers carved into new paths, forests uprooted, and scattered across the land, objects that don't belong to the world that survived. Stones cut with impossible precision, ruins aligned with vanished stars. Legends that speak of beings who walked out of the water, out of the sky, or out of the dark. If the flood was the reset, then who pressed the button? And more importantly, who wrote the system that rebooted afterward? Ancient civilizations give us answers, not direct ones, but shadows, silhouettes, reflections of someone standing just outside human memory. Tonight we step toward that silhouette, not to prove, not to declare, but to consider, because the pattern is too strange to ignore. Possibility 1. The ancients were not primitive, they were survivors of someone greater. The first possibility is unsettling because it is human. It proposes that before the flood, long before the pyramids, Stonehenge, Sumer, or the Indus Valley, there existed a human civilization far older and far more advanced than the one we know. Not sci-fi giant robots advanced, but advanced in the ways that matter. Navigation, astronomy, stone engineering, mathematics, agriculture, ocean trade. A world-spanning coastal culture whose cities now lie beneath 120 meters of seawater. If it existed, it would explain everything. Why the earliest calendars appear fully formed. Why the first temples match star positions from earlier eras. Why civilizations reboot with identical modules. Law, kingship, priesthood, sky knowledge. Why megaliths appear suddenly, with no prototypes. This lost civilization wouldn't be alien, just forgotten. Overwritten by water. Preserved only in memories turned into myths. And the programmers would have been their rulers, engineers, astronomer priests, the custodians of knowledge who survived the flood and fed fragments of their system into the rebuilding cultures who saw them as gods, because they remembered the older, greater world humanity had lost. If so, the programmers were human, just not humans we remember. Possibility 2, a breakaway civilization that never went extinct. The second possibility is stranger. It suggests that a group, maybe small, maybe isolated, developed differently from the rest of humanity, somewhere remote. A plateau, a cave system, an island chain, a desert fortress, a mountain ringed by storms. This group didn't perish in the flood. They rose above it, literally. If they mastered agriculture early, if they mastered astronomy early, if they created systems of law or hierarchy far before the mainstream world, they could have stepped away from the human timeline entirely. While humanity struggled to rebuild villages, they guarded archives. While humans relearned farming, they preserved old seeds. While humans tried to remember constellations, they maintained observatories intact. Their isolation became their power, and their eventual reappearance, whether as gods, culture bringers, or sky teachers, was simply a return of a civilization that never died, a breakaway lineage, a parallel timeline. The programmers, in this scenario, are neither gods nor aliens. They are the ones who never lost their operating system, the last remnants of a chapter we forgot to read. Possibility 3. Intelligence that did not start on Earth. And then there is the third possibility. The oldest idea humanity ever had. That someone came from the sky. Not in ships of metal, not with laser weapons, but as beings of knowledge. Organizers, architects, teachers. Across the world, ancient cultures described them with eerie similarity. Tall, radiant, long-lived, able to command weather, stars, or time, and always arriving after catastrophe, never before. Sumer called them the ones who descended from heaven. Egypt called them the Shining Ones. The Maya called them the Itzamna. The Dogon called them the Nomo. India wrote of devas descending in luminous vehicles. The Greeks wrote of titans and Olympians. Polynesians described luminous navigators who could sail the sky. These cultures had no contact, but their descriptions rhyme. They always come from above. They always leave suddenly. They always restructure society. They always install kingship, calendars, and laws. They always promise to return. Are these literal beings, symbolic memories, or shadows of something humanity interacted with, but never fully understood? We can't know. But the similarity of the myths is a fingerprint, even if we don't know the owner of the hand. 3 builders, 3 motives. If any of these possibilities were real, there must be a motive. No operating system is installed without purpose. Across myths, motives fall into 3 categories. 1. Survival. Keeping knowledge alive after a catastrophe. Ensuring humans didn't fall into extinction. Passing down fragments of astronomy, agriculture, and law to rebuild the world. This is the gentle motive, the fatherly one. 2. Experimentation. Humanity as a project, a species to guide, monitor, cultivate. Not slaves, but subjects. This idea echoes through the Epic of Atrahasis, the Book of Enoch, the Popol Vuh, early Greek cosmology, Egyptian priestly texts. The idea that humanity was shaped, taught, corrected, reset, a species under supervision. 3. Control, the darkest possibility. Knowledge becomes power. Power becomes hierarchy. Hierarchy becomes obedience. Civilization is the perfect structure for control. Centralized kings, priestly intermediaries, divine authority, controlled calendars, controlled narratives. If someone wanted a world that ran predictably, they would create systems that ensure predictability. Religion, law, kingship, myth, not to elevate humanity, but to stabilize it. This motive is why nearly every ancient king claimed to rule by the sky, by heaven, by divine right, by blood that is not mortal. That's not coincidence. That is programming. What would the programmers leave behind? If a civilization, human or otherwise, reshaped the world after the flood, what evidence would it leave? Not metal. Metal rusts. It crumbles. It disappears. Not wood. Not cloth. Not papyrus. But stone? Stone survives, which explains why the oldest structures are the most impossible. Göbekli Tepe, Sphinx enclosure, Baalbek platform, Puma Punku, Angkor prelayers, Nan Madol, Yonaguni monument beneath the sea, the megalithic rings of Malta, Adam's calendar in South Africa. These places were not built by the same cultures who inherited them. The builders are absent, silent, missing, but their fingerprints are everywhere. Perfect alignments, impossible tolerances, mathematics encoded in stone, star maps carved into ceilings long before the stars moved. The programmers didn't leave their names. They left architecture, and architecture does not lie. The silence of history books, and why the absence speaks loudest. Every ancient civilization claims, we were taught, we were guided, we were given laws, we were shown the stars. Our first kings came from heaven. Modern historians say these are myths, but myths emerge from memory, not imagination. If a culture wants to invent something, it invents heroes. But gods who intervene briefly and leave, teachers who appear and then vanish, kings descending from the sky and ruling for centuries, those aren't the inventions we expect. Those are the remnants of a story that once was clear and is now fragments. The absence of the programmers is not proof they didn't exist. It is proof that they were erased. By water, by time, by deliberate omission. Because the most powerful civilizations shape not only the world, but the narrative. And whoever installed humanity's operating system could shape both. Breathing pause. Let the possibilities settle for a moment. A forgotten human civilization. A breakaway lineage. A non-human intelligence. None proven, none dismissed. Just 3 silhouettes standing behind the curtain of prehistory. Whoever they were, their work survived. In our myths, in our architecture, in our institutions, in our calendars, in our hierarchies, in our sense of order, in the unbroken line of kingship that stretches from Sumer to today. The programmers may be gone, but the system still runs. The programmers disappear, but their hierarchy remains. This leads us directly to the next piece of the puzzle. Why does every civilization, no matter how distant, use the same structure? King, priest, people. Top, middle, base. A triangle of control that hasn't changed in 6,000 years. Human nature didn't invent that. Evolution didn't produce that. It was installed. A module, a template, a hierarchy designed to ensure stability or obedience, which means the programmers didn't just build monuments of stone. They built monuments of power. And these monuments did not disappear after the flood. They become the spine of every civilization since. Thrusting from Egypt to China, true power never comes from the people. It descends from the sky. There's a reason ancient thrones point upward. A reason crowns are shaped like sunbursts. A reason kings were never elected. They were chosen. Chosen by gods, by heaven, by stars, by sky creatures, by ancestors who came from above. No matter which continent you visit, no matter which ancient culture you study, the story of power is always the same. It does not rise from the ground. It falls from the sky. And if you follow that pattern long enough, you begin to see something chillingly consistent. A hierarchy that looks less like human invention and more like a long-running piece of software. Tonight, we peel back the curtain on that hierarchy. Not to accuse, not to condemn, but to understand its origin. Because if kingship was installed, who installed it? The oldest template, king, priest, people. Walk into any ancient temple, Sumer, Egypt, Maya, Inca, China, the Indus Valley, Southeast Asia, the Pacific Islands. Different languages, different myths, different environments. Yet the structure is always identical. 1. A supreme ruler. A king, pharaoh, emperor, shaman king, or sky-descended leader. 2. A priestly or elite class. Gatekeepers of knowledge, ritual, and communication with those above. 3. The people. Farmers, builders, workers, those who sustain the system. A vertical tower, a power pyramid, a top-down architecture. This hierarchy appears suddenly in the archaeological record, not evolving, arriving. Villages do not naturally produce divine kings overnight. Hunter-gatherers do not spontaneously invent priestly castes. Yet one day, with no prototypes, no transition period, no earlier iterations, complex hierarchy appears fully formed, like a module installed, a template deployed, a structure copied and pasted across the planet. And that consistency, that perfect similarity, is the fingerprint of design. Egypt, where kings were born as gods. In Egypt, the king was not a man. He was a living god. Not symbolic, not poetic, literal. Pharaoh was the son of Ra. His bloodline was solar. His authority came from the heavens, and his body was considered a vessel for divine power. The entire civilization was a machine built around this idea. Priests served the divine king. Laws were the king's voice. Architecture expressed cosmic order. The people were the stabilizing base. This wasn't improvisation. It was a system, a predetermined structure. And Egyptian priests openly claimed kingship descended from the sky in the first time. They didn't see it as invention. They saw it as inheritance. China, the right to rule, issued from heaven. Across the world, ancient China mirrors Egypt almost perfectly. The emperor did not rule by popular support. He ruled by the mandate of heaven, a literal cosmic license. Heaven chose the emperor. Heaven could revoke the throne. Heaven legitimized every dynasty. The structure again. Emperor at the top, court and priestly astronomical officials beneath him, the people at the foundation. And just like Egypt, Chinese legends say civilization was given to them by sky-descended beings. Fuji Nuwa, the Yellow Emperor, Shennong, all described as luminous, long-lived, or part animal, part sky, part something not human. They brought writing, calendars, agriculture, medicine, law, metallurgy. Not discovered, delivered, installed. The operating system repeats. The Maya and the Sun Kings of the Americas travel across the ocean. The story is the same. Maya kings were known as Aja, he who receives the descent. Their right to rule came from gods in the sky. The Inca emperor, the child of the sun, a living descendant of a luminous being who came down to shape humanity. Aztec emperors were chosen by sky omens and visions from those who watch from above. Even the North American tribes, like the Choctaw, Lakota, and Hopi, spoke of ancestors arriving from the sky to teach creation, agriculture, and governance. Civilization doesn't start on the ground. It starts in the heavens. Always. Polynesia, navigators from the stars. On isolated islands across the Pacific, far from Sumer, Egypt, or China, the same story appears again. Polynesians claim their first chiefs were guided by star travelers. Long ears, tall bodies, pale skin that glowed, arriving in canoes that shone like fire, teaching navigation, law, taboo, and hierarchy. They always arrive after catastrophe, floods, storms, darkness. Always with knowledge, always with authority, always from the sky. Polynesia, the most isolated region of ancient Earth, uses the exact same template. That is not coincidence. It is propagation. It is replication. It is installation. Hierarchy as a program, not a belief. If kingship were only a belief, it would vary wildly. If priesthood were only cultural, it would evolve differently. If divine right were symbolic, it wouldn't appear globally. But they are identical. That means they are modules, functions, subroutines, written into the architecture of civilization. Look at their behavior. 1. Kings centralize power. This stabilizes the system. 2. Priests control knowledge. This preserves the system. 3. The people labor. This sustains the system. This structure is mathematically perfect. The kind of structure an engineer would design. Nature does not produce this. Culture does not converge this tightly. But software does. Programs do. Templates do. The more you zoom out, the more humanity looks like a coordinated project. Where did the Sky Authority come from? If every ancient civilization claims kingship came from the sky, there are 3 possibilities. 1. They all independently invented the same myth. This is statistically impossible. 2. They all inherited the same memory. A pre-flood civilization taught the world before dying. 3. They all encountered a real presence. Something, human or not, presented kingship as a package. Power structure, law, religion, astronomy, calendar, myth, symbolism. A complete operating system. Installed, not discovered, maintained, not evolved. And the kings, the ones placed at the top, were not rulers. They were administrators, managers, interpreters, human interfaces between the population and whoever installed the system. The king wasn't divine. He was authorized. The invisible script that still runs today. We think we live in modern times. We think we left ancient hierarchy behind. But we didn't. We only changed the costumes. Presidents, prime ministers, CEOs, billionaires, religious leaders, elected representatives, different titles, same roles. Power still flows downward. Authority still centralizes. People still support the structure. Civilization didn't evolve beyond kingship. It merely rebranded it. The ancient operating system still runs. The sky no longer gives the mandate, but power still behaves as if the mandate exists. That's how you know a system is truly old. It persists even after its creators vanish. Breathing. Pause. Take a breath. Forget your assumptions for a moment. Forget everything you've been taught about history. Look at the pattern alone. Sumer, kingship from heaven. Egypt, Pharaoh as God. China, mandate of heaven. Maya, Inca, sun descendants. Polynesia, star navigators installing law. Middle East, angels delivering rule. Norse, gods granting kingship. Africa, sky ancestors establishing clans. So many cultures, so many distances, so many barriers. One story. Someone gave humanity hierarchy. Someone installed an operating system. And we still run on it. If the hierarchy was installed once, is it still running? This is the question we must carry to the next chapter. If kingship was delivered, if priesthood was engineered, if the structure was encoded, then what does that say about our biology, our instincts, our psychology, our sense of authority? Was hierarchy installed only in society, or was it installed in us? Does the operating system live in stone monuments, or in our DNA? That is the mystery waiting in the next descent. What if royal blood isn't just a metaphor, but a fading echo of a different kind of human? There's a strange feeling you get when you walk through ancient tombs. A sense that the people buried in these places were not the same as the ones burying them. Longer lived, taller, more luminous, more allowed to stand closer to the sky. Their statues exaggerated. Their myths insist on it. Their genealogies protect it. But the real mystery isn't the kings. It's the bloodlines. Because, for thousands of years, humanity behaved as if certain families carried something different, something worth preserving at all costs. Tonight, we explore the possibility that the operating system of civilization wasn't only installed in society, but in biology. The myth of the long-lived ones. Every ancient civilization has a category of beings that live unnaturally long. The Sumerian antediluvian kings who ruled for tens of thousands of years. The Egyptian followers of Horus who lived centuries before the pharaohs. The Old Testament patriarchs, some living nearly a millennium. The Hindu devas and rishis with lifespans stretching into cosmic cycles. The Greek titans and demigods living for centuries. The Chinese sage kings said to rule for hundreds of years. The Polynesian Akua, who were immortal unless wounded. Separate cultures, separate continents, no contact, but the same motif. An age when humans lived longer, far longer, and possessed a different biological code. Modern science dismisses these as myth, but the pattern is too global to ignore. Something, at some time, altered human lifespan. The only question is, was it natural or edited? The bloodlines that would not mix. Kings guarded their bloodlines with obsession bordering on paranoia. Egyptian pharaohs married siblings, not for romance, but to keep the divine blood pure. Sumerian kings traced their ancestry directly to the sky beings who descended. Chinese emperors insisted their lineage was literally sanctioned by heaven. The Maya claimed the first kings were children of the sun. Inca emperors kept a closed genetic line reaching back to the sky-descended founder Manco Capac. European monarchs defended blue blood, a term hinting at difference, separation, anomaly. West African kingdoms traced their kings back to shining beings who came from above the clouds. Even Polynesian chiefs maintained genealogies reaching back to star navigators, beings who were not entirely like men. Why would so many cultures isolate royal bloodlines? What were they trying to preserve? A memory? A privilege? A genetic artifact? A piece of the original operating system? Biological anomalies, the echoes in our cells. Modern genetics is young, too young to answer deep questions, but it has uncovered anomalies that create long shadows. 1. Haplogroups that appear suddenly. Some human genetic lines emerge abruptly in prehistory without clear ancestral buildup. 2. Ancient individuals with unusual height or bone density. Not giants, but individuals who stand out dramatically from their populations. 3. Genetic bottlenecks aligned with global catastrophes. Points in time where humanity nearly vanished, yet certain lineages survived as if protected. 4. Enigmatic traits found in isolated elite burials. Unusual skull shapes, uncommon mitochondrial markers, remains with unexplained mutations. Nothing definitive, nothing conclusive, just enough to be unsettling. The body carries memory. Genes carry stories. And some stories whisper about a past where not all humans were the same. Demigods, the half-remembered hybrids. Across the world, myth describes beings born between two realms. Hercules, son of Zeus. Gilgamesh, two-thirds divine. The Nephilim, offspring of the sons of God. The Pandavas of India, born from celestial beings. The Maui lineage in Polynesia, half human, half Akua. Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent in human form. The Tuatha De Danann in Ireland, radiant and not mortal. These beings live longer, fight stronger, rule more naturally, understand the heavens instinctively, possess knowledge ordinary humans shouldn't know. Is this metaphor? Possibly. But in myth studies, metaphors rarely repeat this perfectly across continents. This looks less like metaphor and more like a distorted memory, a time when two populations mingled, one fully human, one not quite. When the operating system first installed. Were we edited after the flood? If a civilization reset the world after the flood, they may have done more than rebuild cities. They may have shortened human lifespans, standardized biology, removed abilities, constrained potential, limited memory, stabilized population dynamics, not as punishment, but as control. A population that lives 800 years is unstable. A population that remembers 10,000 years of history is unpredictable. A population with access to cosmic knowledge is difficult to govern. If humanity was redesigned, the purpose may have been to simplify, to create a version of humans compatible with the new operating system. A hard thought, a dark thought, but myths worldwide insist. After the flood, lifespans collapsed, abilities faded, memory shortened. Humans became lesser. Why would a natural disaster change biology? Unless biology was recalibrated. Why would anyone edit humanity? If the programmers existed, their motives fall into three possibilities. 1. Preservation. Protect humanity by limiting the traits that caused previous conflict or instability. 2. Efficiency. Shorter lifespans produce faster generational turnover, ideal for rebuilding civilization. 3. Control. A population with limited memory and shorter reigns is easier to guide. None of these require malice, just management. A gardener prunes a tree, not to harm it, but to shape it. Were humans shaped or pruned? We can't know. But the myths feel less like stories and more like documentation. The strange obsession with purity. If ancient elites carried remnants of older biology, longer life, stronger bodies, sharper minds, it would explain why they guarded their blood, not for power, not for wealth, but to preserve the last echoes of a dying genetic legacy. And if the flood erased the original population, these elites would be the only carriers of the old code. Their bloodlines would be backups, failing backups, slowly degrading across time. Royal families across the world reflect this tragic pattern. Their power fades, their lifespans normalize, their divine traits dilute, until only symbolism remains. Crowns, scepters, regalia, artifacts of an era when kings were not symbolic. They were biological exceptions. Not better, not superior, just different. Breathing pause. Take a moment. Let the idea breathe. Imagine humanity after the flood, a population reduced, a world drowned. A few survivors carrying remnants of an older genetic code. They intermix, they spread knowledge, they recreate civilization from memory. And their bloodlines, once extraordinary, fade into myth, until only the stories remain. The stories we call legend. The stories we laugh at. Stories that might be echoing a biological truth. A truth we don't have the tools to confirm, yet cannot fully dismiss. If biology was edited, what else was? If the operating system of civilization is installed, if hierarchy is installed, if myths are operating instructions, then what about the body? What about instincts? obedience, fear of the unknown, attraction to leadership, need for myth, longing for meaning, memory limits, lifespan constraints. Are these natural or configured? This is not a claim, only question. But questions are dangerous when patterns are old. Humanity behaves like a species running inherited code. And if that's true, then what is the next module? What was edited out of us? And what, if anything, might still be dormant, waiting? This brings us to the next mystery, the ghost in the machine. If biology carries echoes of the old world, then society carries shadows of the old hierarchy. The next chapter explores something even stranger. Even when civilizations vanish, their system structures survive. Governments, religions, corporations, currencies, borders, bureaucracy, all behave like ancient programs running on modern hardware, which means the old operating system never died. It adapted. And that leads us to the next descent. We changed our flags and our languages, but the structure stayed the same. There's a haunting familiarity in the world around you, a sense that no matter how modern our society becomes, the bones beneath the surface never really change. Walk into a corporate skyscraper. Walk through a government building. Sit in a cathedral. Stand inside a courtroom. Strip away the LED lights, the glass facades, the microphones, the suits. And what remains? A king. A priest. A scribe. A hierarchy. The same ancient architecture wearing a new costume. It's as if civilization is a machine still running an old operating system, one installed long before we remember. A system designed by someone we no longer see, yet whose influence hums quietly beneath everything. A ghost in the machine. The world still runs on ancient modules. Look around. The world pretends to be modern, but its core functions mirror Bronze Age civilization with eerie precision. 1. Kings, presidents, prime ministers, CEOs. We don't call them kings, but they wield king-like power. Signatures that change lives. Decisions that move armies. Control over nations and corporations. Ceremonial settings built like thrones. Protection by elite guards. Global recognition by name. Remove the titles. The role remains. 2. Priests. Media, advisors, experts, analysts. The interpreters of the world. Once, priests interpreted the will of gods. Now, analysts interpret markets. Journalists interpret events. Advisors interpret data. Influencers interpret culture. Different language, same function. Define meaning. Shape belief. Guide the masses. 3. Scribes. Bureaucrats, technocrats, administrators. In Sumer, scribes controlled records, taxes, production. Today, they run government agencies, financial systems, legal channels, digital databases. The scribe's power never faded. It digitized. 4. The people. the base of the pyramid. Every system rests on workers, taxpayers, voters, consumers. Just as ancient temples rested on farmers, artisans, and laborers. Different tools, same architecture. It is almost mathematical. As if civilization can be reskinned infinitely. But its underlying structure never changes. That's not evolution. That's persistence. Cities still mirror ancient temples. It's not only institutions, it's geography. Look at the layout of modern cities. A central district, the palace, government square, the temple, commercial zones, the marketplace, outer districts, the commons, walls replaced by highways, watchtowers replaced by surveillance. We claim progress, but we still build the world like ancient Sumer. Even the shape of cities, radiating outward from a central authority, echoes the oldest template. Civilization is not reinventing itself, it is remembering itself. The invisible algorithms guiding human behavior. Here is where the ghost becomes unsettling. Human psychology still responds to ancient stimuli. We worship celebrities like divine icons. We treat billionaires as modern kings. We elevate political leaders with ceremonial reverence. We seek belonging in tribes, brands, teams, nations. We fear the other. We obey authority signals unconsciously. We submit to hierarchy instinctively. It's as if something deep inside us, something old, something precognitive, is still running code written in another age. Anthropologists call it evolutionary behavior. But the patterns are too precise, too architectural, too modular. It behaves less like instinct and more like programming. Mythology migrated into modernity. The gods of old returned, not as beings but as structures. Instead of Zeus, we have the state. Instead of the oracle, we have the algorithm. Instead of sacrifices, we give our time, data, and attention. Instead of temples, we gather on digital platforms with rituals and chants. We didn't abandon ancient myth, we updated it. Humanity replaced supernatural beings with abstract systems just as powerful and just as demanding. The ghost in the machine may not be a who, it may be a what. A blueprint so deeply embedded in civilization that we cannot escape it, even when we forget its origin. Why does the structure survive every reset? Think about this. Empires fall, languages vanish, religions fade. Economies collapse, technologies disappear. But the underlying architecture, leader, elite, people, never dies. Even when humanity starts over from scratch, the structure rebuilds itself identically. This shouldn't happen. Randomness should produce variation. Chaos should produce divergence. But history behaves like a system with memory. A system that reinstalls itself after each reboot. Just like a machine with a pre-configured OS. Just like a template that reloads. This raises a disturbing possibility. The hierarchy is not cultural. It is foundational. Not invented but inherited. Not chosen but embedded. Not evolving but recurring. Where is the programmer now? If the original architects, the programmers, installed the hierarchy, why are they gone? Possibilities whisper from the shadows. They died in the flood. They left Earth. They hid. They integrated and vanished. They were erased from history deliberately. Or their purpose ended. Or they're still here, unseen. Not as a species, not as a bloodline, but as influence, as institutions built to last thousands of years, as patterns buried in law and culture, as systems that recreate themselves automatically. Perhaps the programmers do not need to return. Their code already rules. Is the ghost alive, or just echoing? When you watch global politics, religious movements, financial markets, corporate power struggles, the behavior feels eerily familiar. Symbolic rituals, initiation ceremonies, hierarchical loyalty, sacred language, forbidden knowledge, councils of elites, secrecy, myth-making. Modern institutions use the same architecture as ancient temples. It is not new behavior. It is inherited behavior. Echoes of the old world, a ghost running through the machine. Breathing. Pause. Pause for a moment. Look at the world with fresh eyes. Governments, corporations, religions, schools, armies, digital platforms. They look different. They feel modern. But beneath the aesthetics, the code is ancient. It is familiar. It is the same operating system we've traced since Sumer, a hierarchy descending from the sky, a priesthood controlling knowledge, a population carrying the system forward without questioning it. Civilization isn't progressing linearly. It's looping, running the same architecture in each era, in each culture, in each reset. A ghost that refuses to die. If the ghost still runs the machine, what are we? Here lies the quiet question. Are we users? Are we caretakers? Are we components? Or are we simply running programs written for a world that no longer exists? If the operating system was installed by architects long gone, then humanity might be living inside a structure designed for purposes we no longer understand. A structure we perpetuate unconsciously. A structure we carry forward automatically. A structure that feels normal only because it is ancient. This is not a conclusion. Only an invitation to see the world differently. Because, in the next chapter, we confront the final question. If the ghost runs the machine, can the machine ever be rewritten? Maybe history is not a story we discovered, but a story we were given. Imagine closing a book you've been reading your entire life, only to realize the first chapters are missing, ripped out, soaked, rewritten, replaced. You turn the pages backward, back through kings, temples, empires, floods, and stones, until you reach the blank space, where human memory ends and something older begins. For the last 2 hours, we've walked along the edge of that blank space, feeling its borders, touching its shadows, listening for echoes from a world erased. But now we've reached the most important moment. We have collected the clues. We have followed the patterns. The question that remains is the question that started this entire journey. If civilization is an operating system, who wrote the code? And, even deeper, why was it installed? Looking back at the path we walked, we began with a single artifact, a clay tablet that should not exist, written too perfectly, too early, too suddenly. From that fragment, we traced a global pattern. 1. Civilization did not start simple. It began fully formed, with writing systems, calendars, priesthoods, astronomy, and kingship emerging overnight. 2. The world before the flood was larger than we imagine. Ancient coastlines now lie under the ocean, holding the ruins of a forgotten age. 3. Megaliths appeared at version 10.0, not version 1.0. No prototypes, no learning curve, just perfect engineering from day one. 4. A reset, global, devastating, wiped something massive away. Every culture remembers the same flood, the same survivors, the same return of sky teachers. 5. The idea of programmers, whether human, breakaway, or other. 3 possibilities, none proven, all plausible. 6. A hierarchy installed from above, kingship, priesthood, divine right, all appearing globally, identically. 7. Biological echoes in human blood. Long lifespans, hybrid figures, royal lines, anomalies. 8. The ghost, still active in modern society. Governments, corporations, religions, all following the same ancient blueprint. This is not proof. This is not doctrine. It is a constellation, a pattern that becomes visible only when you connect the stars. 3 possible explanations. Now, at the final turn of the journey, we face the 3 broad possibilities that can explain everything we've seen. None are comfortable. All are worth considering. Possibility 1. We misunderstood history. Perhaps the story is simpler. Maybe humans were always capable of sudden leaps. Maybe ancient people were smarter, faster, more organized than modern assumptions allow. Maybe temples, calendars, and kingship appear suddenly because we simply lost all earlier evidence. This explanation comforts many, but it ignores how perfectly the patterns align across continents. Still, it cannot be dismissed. History is full of surprises. Possibility 2. Civilization is a story, written by humans, for humans. This explanation suggests that civilization's origin story was crafted by elites for authority. Kings come from the sky, political justification. Priests speak to gods, controlled knowledge. Calendars from heaven, structured society. In this view, the operating system was not installed by external beings. It was installed by humans to control other humans. But this explanation struggles with the global repetition. Thousands of cultures with no contact telling the same story? Coincidence seems too fragile to support that weight. Possibility 3. Civilization was installed. The darkest, the strangest, the one that feels unreasonable until you see the pattern. A pre-flood civilization, a breakaway lineage, a non-human intelligence. Whatever the form, the idea is simple. Someone built the framework. Someone rebooted the world after the flood. Someone gave early humans knowledge they should not have had. The evidence is indirect, but the pattern is clear. This possibility raises a final question. What was the purpose? If the operating system was installed, why? Thousands of years of myth whisper 3 answers. 1. To preserve humanity. After catastrophe, after the flood, after forgetting, someone had to restart the species. Civilization was a survival mechanism. 2. To shape humanity. We are not the same as those who came before. Our biology, lifespans, instincts may have been edited. Civilization was a controlled ecosystem. 3. To guide humanity. A system of laws, kings, temples, and stories designed to keep society stable during a long period of reconstruction. Civilization was a caretaker program. None of these answers are mutually exclusive. All could be true, or none. The truth may be stranger still. The soft truth we may never know. And here is the most important part. This journey is not about choosing a belief, not about proving a theory, not about rejecting history. It is about noticing the patterns, that the first civilizations behave like restorations, that ancient myths tell similar stories, that architecture appears without prototypes, that floods reset the world, that hierarchy descends instead of rising, that our society still runs on ancestral code. Patterns are not truth, but they point toward something. And whatever they point to shapes the world we live in. Perhaps the ghost in the machine is real. Perhaps it is metaphor. Perhaps it is memory encoded in myth. But the question remains, can the operating system be rewritten? This is where the journey becomes personal. We inherit systems we did not design. We follow rules we did not choose. We live inside a structure older than our memory. But unlike ancient humans, we have something they did not: the ability to see the system. Once you see the pattern, you are no longer part of it automatically. You become an observer, a thinker, a rewriter. Maybe the purpose of understanding the past is not to find who wrote the first version, but to decide who writes the next. Because if civilization is software, then humanity is the developer now. The operating system can evolve. We can evolve. But only if we stop running on inherited code and begin writing our own. Closing cinematic image. Picture the camera drifting away from Earth, cities glowing like neural nodes, highways pulsing like synapses, the planet a giant circuit board humming softly. Then slowly it zooms inward, through clouds, through stone monuments, through old temples, through clay tablets, through DNA strands, until it reaches a single spark in a human mind, a thought, a question, a choice. The moment a species realizes it can rewrite its story, the screen fades to black. And only one question remains. If you could rewrite civilization, what would the first line say?